Hello everyone, myself Krishna. In this video, I am going to explain about all the database activities in UiPath Studio. So let's get started. To work with database activities, we need to install UiPath.database.activities package. By default, this package won't be available in the dependencies. We need to install it from Manage Packages. So click on Manage Packages, click on Official and search for database. Select the package UiPath.database.activities package. Choose the latest version. Click on install and click on save. Now the package got installed. So let's go to the activities panel. Search for database. So these are all the activities for the database. Connect to database activity is used to establish the connection to the database. To create the connection, we need to click on configure connection, click on connection wizard, and here in the data source we need to select the database that we will going to connect. So here I am going to connect with Microsoft SQL Server. So I am selecting Microsoft SQL Server. Then we need to choose the authentication. Here we have two types of authentications are available: Windows authentication and SQL Server authentication. So let's understand these two authentications first. Windows authentication means you will get a database access on a specific machine level. For this authentication, we will not have any username and password. By using the server name and database name, we will connect to the database. SQL Server authentication means for connecting the database, we will have a username and password. By using server name, database name, username and password, we will going to connect to the database. The main difference between the Windows authentication and SQL Server authentication is, in Windows authentication, you will going to connect to the database in a machine where you have access by using the server name and database name. In the SQL Server authentication, you will going to connect to the database from any machine by using the server name, database name, username and password. Here in my machine, the SQL Server configured with Windows authentication. So here I need to mention only server name and the database name. So here in the server name field, I am going to mention my server name. And here in the database name section, I am going to select the database employee. Then click on test connection. So here you can find the success message. In case if the provided details are wrong, here in the same screen you will get the exception details. So click on OK and click on OK. Now we have created the connection, and here you can find the connection string and the provider name. The provider name will automatically selected as per the database name that you have chosen in the connection wizard. The output of the connect to database activity will give us the database connection. So let me create a variable to store the database connection. So let me take one log message to display the connection success message. Right? Now here we have mentioning the connection string directly, right? So it is better to maintain the connection string in the UiPath orchestrator assets under secret data type. So let me show you how we can save the connection string in the UiPath orchestrator assets under secret data type. So first let me copy the connection string. and let's go to the UiPath Orchestrator. To create the asset, we need to click on Add Asset, create a new asset. So here in the asset name, we need to mention the asset name. So here I mention the asset name as SQL connection string. So in the type, we need to choose the secret, and here in the secret value, we need to paste the connection string. Then click on Create. Now let's access this UiPath Orchestrator asset in the studio. So let's go back to the UiPath studio. So here I am going to take an activity, get secret. In the secret asset name, I am going to select the asset that I have created, SQL connection string. The output of the get secret activity will give us the secure string. So let me create a variable. Now let's copy the variable, and in the connect to database activity, first remove the connection string. In the secure connection string, let's paste the variable, right? Now let's run the process and let's see whether the connection is creating or not. Now the process execution has been completed, and here in the output we can see the connection success message, right? Disconnect from database activity is used to disconnect the database connection, right? So for this activity in the existing connection, we need to pass the database connection variable. So here I am going to pass the DB connection. So here I am going to take one log message, and I'm going to mention the message as connection disconnected, right? Now let's save and run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed, and if you go to the output panel, so here we can find the connection success message and connection disconnected message, right? Run query activity is used to extract the tables information from the database. So it could be a single cell value or a single column or multiple columns or single row or multiple rows details. For the run query activity, we need to mention the database connection details. The database connection details we can mention in two ways. If the database connection is already created, that variable we can mention in the existing connection. So in this case, it will not going to create a new connection, so it will use that existing connection and then it will execute the queries. Or else we can mention the connection string either in the connection string field or secure connection string field. So if you are mentioning the connection string, the provider name is mandatory. So in this case, so the run query will going to create a new connection, right? And then it will going to execute the query. So I will show you these two scenarios. So first I am going to mention the secure connection string and the provider name. So in the get secret activity, we already extracted the connection string. So let me copy the variable, and here in the secure connection string, I am going to paste the variable, and I am going to copy the provider name and paste in the provider name field in the run query. So here we have a command type. So here we have three types are available: text, stored procedure, and table direct. So text means we need to mention the complete query in the SQL query field. And if you select the stored procedure, we need to mention the stored procedure name in the SQL query field. Table direct means it will going to extract the all the table data. So for this we need to mention the table name in the SQL query. Here one thing, so this table direct will not work for all the databases. The output of the run query activity will give us the output as data table. So here I am going to create a variable. Now I am going to convert the data table into the text. So for that I am going to take output data table as text activity. So let me take one log message to display the data table text. Right? Here in the database I have created one table. The table name is employee details. Here in the table we have 5 employee details are available. So let's see how we can extract all the employee details in the UiPath Studio. In the SQL query we need to mention the query. I am going to mention select star from employee details. Click on save. So as we are mentioning the complete query, so in the comment type should be text. So let's save and run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. So in the output panel, we can see all the 5 employee details, right? Now in the run query, I am going to remove the provider name and the secure connection string variable, and I am going to mention the existing connection as DB connection. Now let's run the process and verify the output. So in the output, we can see all the 5 employee details, right? Now I want to extract the employee details whose salary is greater than 40,000. So let's see how we can write the query and extract the details. So here I am going to mention the where condition, right? So let's save and run the process. So in the output we can see only 2 employee details and the salary is greater than 40,000, right? Here basically we are mentioning the input values, right? So whenever we are mentioning the input values in the query, it is better to mention them in the parameters. So let me show you how we can mention these values in the parameters. For the run query, we have a property parameters. So click on the parameters. So first we need to mention the parameter name. I'm mentioning the parameter name as salary. So basically this parameter name and the database table columns is not required to match. The data type should be decimal. And here we need to mention the value as 40,000, right? And then in the query we need to change this value with the parameter. So the parameter should start with at the rate and then the parameter. Now let's save and run the process and verify the output. So we are getting the same output, right? So here I would like to add one more filter. So the name should contains I character, right? So let's see how we can write the query and get the details. So here I am going to mention an emp name like at the rate name. So this is parameter, so I am going to mention in the parameters. So here I am going to mention the value as right? Now let's save and run the process and verify the output. So now the process execution completed. So in the output we can see only one employee details and the salary greater than 40,000 and employee name contains I character. Now let's see how we can execute the stored procedure. So here the SQL query I'm going to mention the stored procedure name. So this stored procedure will going to extract all the employee details and we need to remove the parameters. Then we need to change the command type to stored procedure, right? Now let's save and run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed and we have all the employee details, right? In some situations, we need to understand the table schema details, like how many columns are created, column names, columns data type, and what are the keys are applied, right? By using the run query, we can get the table schema as well. So let me show you how we can get the table schema. So in the SQL query, we need to mention the query. So here I mentioned the column name, data type, character max length, right? So in here in the table name, we need to mention what table information you wanted to extract, right? Click on save and then we need to change the command type to text as we are mentioning the complete query. So let's run the process and verify the output. So in the output we can see the column names, employee ID varchar 10 and employee name varchar 100 and salary is of money type, right? In the same way, if you want to know the stored procedure inside query, we can do that. So for that, we can mention the query like sp underscore help text and then the stored procedure name. So click on save and let's save and run the process and verify the output. So now the process execution has been completed. So in the output, so here the complete query inside the stored procedure, right? Run command activity is used to do the database operations like insert, update, and delete operations. So for this activity, first we need to give the connection details. So here we can provide the existing connection or you can provide the connection string plus provider name. So here I am going to mention the existing connection as DB connection. The output of the run command activity will give us the affected rows count. It is in the integer format. So let me create a variable here. So here I am going to take one log message to display the affected rows count. Right? Now let's see how we can insert the details in the database by using the run command activity. So in the SQL server in the employee details table we have three columns are available: employee ID, employee name and salary. So while inserting we need to mention these details. So here in the SQL command I'm going to write a query insert into employee details values and here I'm going to pass the parameter ID, name, salary. click on save and open the parameters. So here we need to mention the parameters value. So id is in the integer format. So here I am going to mention the value as 10, and then name, it is in the string format. I'm going to mention the value as Harini, and salary. So the salary is in the decimal format. So here I am going to mention the value as 50,000, right? Click on OK. So now let's save and run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. So in the output panel we can see affected rows count is 1. Now let's get the all the employee details. Employee details has been added, right? Let's take in a scenario we have employee details in the data table, and let's see how we can add those details in the database by using the run command activity. So for that, first I am going to take one build data table activity. So here I am going to mention 3 columns: ID, name, salary, and I am going to mention the details: 21 John, 23 Jagan, 22 Lalita, 65,000. Right? Click on OK. Let's create a variable. Now we need to iterate the data table. For that I am going to take an activity for each row in data table activity. So here we need to mention the input data table. In the body section I am going to move this run command activity and log message. So here in the parameter section I am going to pass the values as a dynamic. So current row id is available at 0 index, and this should be in the integer format. So I'm going to convert, and name is available at first index, and salary is available at second index, and it should be in the decimal format. So I'm going to convert into decimal, right? So here I'm going to take name. In the log message I'm going to mention this name. So the format is name affected rows, and then it will give the count, right? Let's click on save and let's run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. So in the output panel we can see John affected rows count is 1 and Lalita affected rows count is 1. And let's go back to the SQL server and execute the query. So employee details has been added, right? Now let's see how we can update the details using the run command activity. So I'm using the same approach. So here I'm going to change the values John 1 and Lalita 1. So I'm going to update the details by using the employee ID. So here I'm going to change the query, update employee details. set emp name equal to @name. Name is parameter, and where employee id equal to @id, right? So now we need to mention name and id in the parameters. Click on save, open the parameters. So the salary is not required, remove, and click on OK. So let's save and run the process and verify the output. So in the output we can see John 1 effective rows count is 1 and Lalitha 1 effective rows count is 1. And let's go back to the SQL server. So let's execute the select query. So employee ID 21 John 1 and employee ID 22 Lalitha 1, the names has been updated, right? Now let's see how we can delete the record by using the run command. So here in the SQL command we need to change the query as per delete operation. So here I wanted to delete the employee details on the basis of employee ID. So here I am going to write an SQL query delete employee details where employee ID equal to @ID, right? So here in the parameters name is not required. I am removing and click on OK, and let's save and run the process and verify the output. So in the output we can see John 1 affected rows count is 1 and Lalitha 1 affected rows count 1. And let's go back to the SQL server. So let's execute the select query. So the employee details has been deleted, right? Insert activity is used to insert all the data table data at a time in the database tables. For the insert activity, first we need to mention the connection details. So in the existing connection, I am going to mention the DB connection variable. The output of the insert activity will give us the affected rows count. So here I am going to mention the variable int affected rows count. Here I am going to take a one log message, and I am going to mention the log message as affected rows count. Right? So for the insert activity, we need to pass two inputs, target table name and input data table. So in the target table name, I'm going to mention employee details, and input data table I'm going to mention dt underscore input. So while we are working with the insert activity, we should take care few things in the data table. So the first thing, the column names. The data table column names should exactly match with the database table column names. So here I am going to change the column names as per the database table column name. And salary. So EMP ID, EMP name and salary. And the second thing, the data type. So in the data table we can mention string as a data type for all the columns, but the data should be in the expected format. Basically in the database employee details table we have mentioned integer as a data type for employee ID. So in the data table we need to mention integer type details under employee ID. For the same thing for salary, so in the database we have mentioned money as a data type for salary. So we need to mention decimal type values under salary, right? So here I am going to change the values for employee ID 31, Anil 65,000, 32, Banu, 70,000, right? Now let's save and run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. In the output we can see effective rows count is 2, and let's go back to the SQL server and verify the details. So let's execute the select query. So here two employee details has been added, right? Start transaction is used to perform multiple DB operations, and at the end of the start transaction the DB connection closed automatically. So for this activity we need to mention the connection string. So here we can mention the connection string plus provider name, or we can mention the existing connection. So here I am going to pass the existing connection variable DB connection, right? Here we have one option, use transaction. Means whatever the DB operation that we are performing inside the start transaction will be executed as a single transaction. If any of the DB operation fail, all the DB operation that we mentioned in the start transaction will fail. If you uncheck this option, so all the DB operations perform individually. I will show you these two scenarios. So here I am going to use this insert operation inside the start transaction. So before that let me change the values here. I am going to mention 41 and 42. So let me take another activity, run command. So here I am going to pass the existing connection as a DB connection. So in the SQL command, so I am going to mention the wrong query to get the exception. Right? Now let's put a breakpoint here and let's run the process and verify the output. So here the insert query has been executed. So let's go to the SQL server. So here we can see the status executing query because we have enabled the use transaction, right? So whatever the DB operation that we mentioned inside the start transaction, it is waiting to complete all the DB operations, and based on the DB operation status, then it will going to commit all the DB operations at a time. Here I am going to click on step into. So we are getting the exception for run command, right? So as we are getting the exception for run command, the insert operation also will not going to commit, right? So let's continue. Now let's go back to the SQL server and execute the query. 41 and 42 employee details are not inserted, right? Now let's disable this option and let's save and run the process and verify the output. Now the insert operation has been completed, and let's go back to the SQL server. Let's execute the select query. So here you can see 41 and 42 the employee details has been added. Click on continue. So we are getting the exception for run command activity, right? So as we disable the use transaction option for the start transaction, each DB operation committed individually, right? So the insert operation success, so it will going to commit individually, and only the run command activity operation will be failed, right? For the bulk update activity, we have a property bulk batch update. In case if you are handling huge number of data, if you enable this option, the data will be divided into multiple batches and the updation will happen quickly. Then we need to specify the database connection details. If the connection is already created, we can mention the database connection variable name in the existing connection field, or else we can mention the connection string plus provider name. So here I am going to mention the DB connection variable in the existing connection. The output of the bulk update activity will give us the affected rows count. So here I am going to mention the variable int affected rows. Then I am going to take one log message to display the affected rows count. Right. For the bulk update activity, we need to mention the target table name. So here I am going to mention employee details, and then we need to specify the input data table. So here I mention dt underscore input. Then we need to specify columns used for matching rows. Means which column you wanted to match to update the remaining columns. In the employee details table, we have three columns are available: employee ID, employee name, and salary. If we mention employee ID, so based on the employee ID, the remaining name and salary will going to be updated. If we mention employee ID and employee name, based on these combinations, if any row matches, the salary will get updated. So here I am going to mention employee ID. So here we need to mention the columns in the array format, right? Then the input data table. The input data table structure should exactly match with the database table structure, like column name and data type. So if both are mismatches, then this bulk update activity will give us the error. In the input data table, for all the columns, I have mentioned the data type as string. But in the database for employee details table, for employee ID, I have mentioned data type as integer. For salary, I have mentioned data type as money, right? Before changing this data type, first let's run the process and see what will happen. So here we are getting the exception, and if you open the exception message, so the exception message is saying that the provided columns in the data table do not match the column data type in the database, right? So let's stop the process. So let's change the data type for employee ID and salary, right? Save and run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. In the output we can see affected rows count is 2. So let's go back to the SQL server. So let's execute the select query. So here you can see for employee ID 1 and 2, the employee name and salary has been updated as per the input data table, right? For the bulk insert activity, we need to mention the database connection details. So here in the existing connection, I'm going to mention DB connection variable. The output of the bulk insert activity will give us the affected rows count. So here I am mentioning the int affected rows variable. Then I'm going to take one log message to display the affected rows count. So for the bulk insert activity, we need to mention the target table name. So here I'm mentioning the employee details, and then we need to mention the input data table. So the input data table structure should exactly match with the database table structure like column name and the data type. So in the build data table, I have mentioned the same structure. So here I am going to change the value 100 and 200. I am going to change the name Pawan 90,000 and Ravi 95,000. And let's verify these details are already available in the database or not. So the employee ID 100 and 200 details are not available. Let's save and run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. If you go to the output panel, you can see affected rows count is 2. And let's verify the details in the database. Let's execute the select query. So the 2 employee details has been added, right? Compared to insert activity, the bulk insert activity will going to insert the records in the database tables very quickly. When it comes to input data table structure, while we are working with bulk insert activity, the input data table structure should exactly match with the database table structure, like column names, data type, and order of the columns. Here, for bulk insert activity, I have created input data table and the structure is exactly same as database table structure. So let's see if I change the data type for employee ID, so what will happen, right? Now, the input data table structure and the database table structure is not same. So let's run the process and see what will happen. So we are getting the exception, and if I open the exception message, so it is saying that the data type is mismatched, right? Let's stop the process. So I'm going to change the data type to integer. The order of the input data table columns and the order of the database table column should exactly match, else we will get the exception. So here I'm going to change the order, right? So let's save and run the process and see. So we are getting the exception, right? When you are working with insert activity, the order of the input data table columns doesn't matter. So we can mention the string as a data type for all the columns, but the data should be in the acceptable format. So here I have mentioned the all the columns data type as a string, right? So let's click on OK and let's run the process. So in the output we can see affected rows count is 2, right? Now I am going to change the order, right? Now let's run the process and verify the output. So in the output we can see affected rows count is 2. So let's go to the SQL server and verify these details. So let's execute the select query, and here you can see 9062 employee details added 2 times, right?